Hello and welcome to this practical JavaScript tutorial. In this lesson, we are going to create an application, a contacts app. What this app can do is you can add contact, you can delete contact with this beautiful styling, all done with JavaScript, right? So we are not going to hard code some contact. We are going to write some basic HTML and CSS for the styling, but the functionality itself will be built with JavaScript. That is the ability to add contact. I will show you in a moment. Click add and Mary is added here, and the ability to delete contact as well. I can double click on Mary and it is gone, right? So we're going to build this with JavaScript. It might look like something so trivial, yeah, maybe, but this lesson is targeted for beginners, and the goal is to help a beginner to understand DOM manipulation, some of those basic stuff you can do to HTML DOM using JavaScript, right? So we're going to build the functionalities. We're not going to have contacts that are hard-coded. Each of those contacts will be added to the contact list using JavaScript. We have some event listeners that when you click this button, we pick the value that is in the input field, right? And we create one of these contact rows and add it to the contact list like so, and clear the input field as well, and you double click on a contact and it is gone. All right, so let's get started. The first thing to do is to create an empty folder. You can name it anything you like. I've created a folder, nothing inside it. And open the folder in the code editor of your choice. So this is the folder opened in VS Code. Inside this folder, I want to create some files. So index.html, contacts.css, and contacts.js. Okay, I will get started with the HTML file. We will put some basic HTML inside here. Doc type HTML, head. Inside the head, let's have a title, contact, and I want to link to the CSS file that we just created. Contact.css. Okay, that will be all for the head, and we go into the body. So just a title for the page, and I want to have an input field and a button that is for adding the contact and submitting it. Okay, I will wrap both in a div. Let me give this div ID of input wrapper, and here I'll have an input field of type text, and I'll give it an ID. What do I call it? So we can target the input field in our JavaScript. Name input, maybe a placeholder of enter name. Okay, and then the button to submit the contact, so it will be added to the list of contacts. I will also give this an ID of btn add contact. With that ID, we can target this button and listen to when it was clicked in the JavaScript. Okay, so far, if I open this file in the browser, you can see what we have. Nothing much there. Now, because I want to do CSS next, what I want to do here is to hard code some contacts. Remember, we're supposed to add contacts with JavaScript, right? Not some hard-coded contacts, and we should be able to delete contacts as well. But to help us do CSS styling and see what it looks like, for now I will hard code some contacts here. I'll make a div. This div is going to wrap the contact list, so I will give it an ID of contact list, and inside here I'll make another div. So this will have a class of contact entry, and here yet another div. This will just have the initial, the first letter in the contact full name, and I'll give it a class of name initial. So assuming you have a name Aaron Smith, so the first letter is A, okay, and here we'll have another one. Okay, so this is the full name of the contact, and I will give it a class of full name and save that. So if I refresh this page, we have the first letter of the contact and the full name of the contact. All right, let me make one more contact. So we have two. This let's say Kelly Wonder Woman. Okay, so two names here, two contacts. And before closing the body, I want to import the JavaScript file. Script source is .js, contacts.js. That is the JavaScript file we created initially. Okay, so I think the HTML is done now. Let's go over to the CSS and add some styling to the contact list. So this is the CSS file, and the first thing I want to style here is the body. Now the body, I just want to give it a padding of 24 pixels. Okay, so we have a little bit of spacing, and the next thing is this title. Let's give it an ID, actually, ID of page title. So we can target the page title in the CSS. An ID, that's how you select an ID, with the pound symbol, and we give it a font size of 24 pixels, and color. I have some colors I've selected already to save us some time. 03529C, 03529C. Let me see. Okay, that's fine. The next will be the input wrapper. This div here that's holding the input field and the button, and it has an ID of input wrapper. Input wrapper, what do we want to do? Let's just give it a margin, so there will be space. There will be a space between the input field and the title and the contact list. So we'll give it margin of vertical of margin vertical 24 pixels, 24. For the horizontal, let it be 0. And if I refresh, so we have some spacing. And the next is the input field. Input is the only input field there, so I can just say input. And I want to give some padding for the input field. So padding of 5 pixels and width. Let's increase the width a little bit. And then, but I want to give it a maximum width, so for small screen, maybe very small screen, I don't know, it doesn't stretch beyond the width of the screen of 100%. So the width is 240 pixels, but it shouldn't exceed that. Then for the button, and that's the only button in the HTML page. So we have only one input here and only one button. So I'm targeting this input and this button when I say input or button. I'll give it a padding of 7 pixels for the vertical, 7 pixels, and for the horizontal, let's have 12 pixels. Okay. Alright. Maybe reduce the vertical a little bit because it's looking bigger than the. Okay, I think that's better. Then I'll also give it a background color. Background color of background color of light color. You can give it any color you like, it doesn't matter. And text color will be white, of course. Text color of white, £FFF if you want to use the hex code. And I think it's good. The next will be the contact list, right? For the contact list, actually there's nothing to style there now. Let's style each of the contacts first. So contact entry is each of the contact entries in the contact list. So for the contact entry, I want to display the context in horizontally. So I'll say display flex, and then the flex direction, that should be row. This way we have them horizontally instead of stacked on top of each other. That's the items inside the contact entry. And then want to align the items center, align items center, and a little bit of padding 6 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, better. Then for the initial of the name initial, give it a width of 36 pixels, a height of 36 pixels, and a border radius that will be half the width and height. So it will be a circle, Okay, 18 pixels. When you have a fixed width and a fixed height like this, and you give a border radius that is half of it, of the width or the height, you get a circle. Of course, right now you can't see anything because the color is still white. Now let's give it a background color as well. So background color of, how do I use, of blue. You can use hex code, of course, and color of white. Okay, let's refresh. A little better now. Then let's center this text inside the blue circle. You can say display, flex, align items, center, and justify content. Center. Okay, centered now. And maybe a little bit of opacity, not necessary, but the color is kind of too, okay, it's better now, a little bit faint color. And the next will be the full name. If I go over to the contacts, you can see we have the full name. So we target the full name class in our CSS and give it some styling. So for the full name, let me increase the font size to maybe 24 pixels, and a little bit of margin from the initial, right? So margin left of, let's say, 8 pixels, and some border at the bottom, 1 pixel. Solid, have a selected color of E3. Okay, let's see what that looks like. It's looking better now. And let's give some padding. Padding of 6 pixels. Now, if I refresh, I want the name to stretch the rest of the width. Okay, so you can see that it's just taking the width of the full name, and for that, let me use flex scroll 1. So this is going to make it stretch the entire width. You can see the border bottom is stretching the full width. Alright, I think we're almost done with this. Is there anything else to do for the styling? I don't think there is anything to do here. Let me actually change the background color of the body. Background color pound F5F 9FC. Okay, so we are done with the CSS. Now the next thing to do is to add contacts using JavaScript, which is the main thing we actually want to do in this tutorial. Okay, I'll head over to the JavaScript file, that is contacts.javascript.js, sorry. And what we want to do is to add the functionality, the code to add contacts to our contact list, so that we can enter a name, click the add button, and the contact is added to the list of contacts. The way we can actually do that is by creating the contact using JavaScript. You know, the two contacts we have now are hard-coded in the HTML, right? But our goal is not to have contacts that are hard-coded. Instead, we can add contacts we can delete contacts dynamically, no hard coding. The way we can achieve that in JavaScript is by creating these contact entry and all the items inside it with JavaScript, right? So whenever we click the add button, we will create this div and this div and this div and the initial and the full name. So that's what we will try to achieve in the JavaScript code. And then when a contact is double clicked, we want to remove it from the list of contacts. So we go over to the JavaScript file. The first thing I want to do here is to make a function for adding contacts. This will take the full name of the contact we want to add. So I'll go ahead and check that the full name is actually passed first. So this line is saying if full name is not passed or is not or whatever, or the full name is an empty string, the trim function is going to remove spaces from the string and to check whether it's an empty string. And the other matters, of course, because if assuming that the full name is undefined and you try to call the trim method on it, you get an exception. So the other matters, full name here and before full name dot trim. So now I want to create this div, the contact entry div, and to do that I'll go into this function. I'll say const, let me call it contact div, document create element div. So this is how you can create HTML element in JavaScript, and this is the element you want to create. In this case is a div, so that we create this div here, the div that is wrapping the contact entry. Next is the div has a class name, so I can say contact div dot class name is equal to contact. That is the class of this div, right? So we create the div and we set the class to the class of that div. That is the same thing we have here. And the next thing is, the next thing is to create the div for the initial of the name. Name and we assign a CSS, we assign a class attribute to it as well. So similar to what we did previously, we have created this div and we set the class attribute value, that is name initial. And next is to create the other div for the full name. Actually, before creating the full name div, remember that the name initial has this text inside it, and the way we can do that is we go to the name initial div and we say name initial div dot text content. So what we want to do is to get the first letter in the full name, the first character there. So we can say full name dot char at 0. So this will grab the first character in the full name, right? That is the text we see inside the initial. And with that done, we can proceed now to create the full name div. Create element, once again div, and just like we did for the other divs, we say full name div dot class name is equal to full name. That is the class for this full name div, right? And also the full name div has text. That is this text here. So we can say dot text, and of course the text is full name. All right, so at this point actually we can't see the JavaScript in action yet. For example, say John Doe, we click this button, nothing is happening yet. All right, we get to that point. Now the next thing I want to do is to append these divs, this div and this div inside the parent, and the parent is the contact entry, right? So we have created this div, these two, and the parent as well. I want to append, insert those two divs inside the parent, and we do that. Let's say append. We do that in order. So the first we append is the initial, after that is the full name. So I can say contact dot append. What do I want to append? That is name initial div. Also dot append full name div. Now I've appended the two divs inside the parent. And finally, I want to get the wrapper, the contact list div itself. Remember that everything, each of those contact entry is inside the contact list div, right? So I want to append this contact div inside the contact list, div. This is the list, this is contact div, this is another contact div, just like we have in the JavaScript. I will append this contact div inside the wrapper, and we can say document dot query selector. The ID is contact list, and we can say dot append contact div. So what's going on here? Once again, we target this div by the ID and we append the contact div inside it, right? So that's almost done. Let's see this in action. To do that, I want to target this button, and whenever the button is clicked, I will get the value of this input field and call the add contact function. We can do that by saying array selector. So this we target the button for adding contact, btn. So we are selecting the button for adding contact, and what do we want to do? We want to add an event listener. So whenever the button is clicked, we can do something. Add event listener, click function. So whenever this button is clicked, this function will be called, right? And inside the function, I want to get the value of this input field. To do that, I'll say const name input query selector once again. So we want to get the name input. The ID is name input, and we call the add contact function and pass the value of that name input to it. Name input dot value. So let me explain once again. We target the button, this button here. We select it by the ID, and we add an event listener to it, and the event is click. So it's basically saying whenever the button is clicked, put comma, the function we want to execute this function here. Alright, inside the function we target the input field, we select the input field and call the add contact function, passing the value of whatever that is inside the input field to the add contact function. Alright, so we give this a try. I will refresh this page, say John Doe. Make sure to refresh the page, and we have John Doe here. I will say Mary. Okay, it's working right, but that's not everything we want. We want to make sure that these initials, they have colors, different colors at random, right? Also, I want to delete the hard-coded contacts here. We don't need that anymore. If I refresh the page, everything is gone, of course. Now we can add a new contact, Mary Watson. And one more thing, I want to clear this field whenever we add a contact. You can see that I've added Mary, but this Mary Watson is still here. I'll go to the JavaScript immediately after calling the add contact function. I will say name input dot value. I will set it to an empty string. So whenever I'll refresh, make sure to refresh the page. John Doe. If I click add, the John Doe will disappear. So that's better now. Another thing now is to randomly pick color, right? If I add another one here, you can see that the color is the same. So the color is the same. I want to have some different colors there. So to do that, we just create a simple helper function for that. I will go down here, function random color. So I'll just define some colors here. To save some time, I've already picked, you can pick any color you want. So these are colors. Copy it over to this array here. What I want to do is to return one of these colors at random, right? So I will say return colors. And what do I want to return? Math.flow, math.random, and colors.length. Alright, so this will basically pick one of the colors here at random. So whenever we call this function, we will get one of these colors, right? Let's try that by, we go to the name initial, because that's the one that has the background color, and we set the CSS background color style. Name initial div dot style dot background color is equal to random color, and we give that a try. I'll refresh this page once more. John Doe. Okay, we get a color. Mary, Louis, we get another color. So it is working fine. What else do we need to do here? I think at this point we can say that our add contact function is working as expected, right? The next thing I want to do is to add the functionality, the ability to delete a contact. Remember that we can double click on a contact and it gets deleted. I will do that on the contact div. Contact div, I can come down here. I can actually go up there. Where is the contact div? Contact div dot add event listener, and the event this time is double click. db click function. That's how you add double click, by db click. Please note that it's not camel case, is lowercase altogether. Now simply say contact div dot remove. That's all we need here. So this will remove the entire div, right, from the list of contacts. We refresh. Say John Doe, add Mary, Louis, add Lindsay, add. I will double click on Mary to remove it. Gone. John Doe, gone. Lindsay, gone. Alright guys, so we have come to the end of this lesson, and I hope that you learned, or at least refresh your memory of one or two things about JavaScript DOM manipulation. And thank you for your time. I do hope you click the like button there and subscribe to this channel if you have not done so. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye bye.